We're just a couple weeks away from the 2024 NHL entry draft. The draft combine was just over this last weekend. So let's talk about that. Maybe talk about some oddball questions that some players get asked by NHL Utah and other NHL teams. That's on today's episode of Locked On NHL in Utah.
You are Locked On NHL in Utah, your daily podcast on all things hockey in Utah, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Robyn Leonio, alongside Tom Callahan. We want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We are free and available everywhere you get your podcast. We got a great show on today's episode because we're going to talk a little bit of NHL Draft Combine. We're getting ready for the NHL Draft, Tom, as it's really only about, 2.5 weeks away? We're getting really close. NHL Draft in Vegas at the Sphere. I know a lot of people were excited for it.
Sphere. It's Sphere. No, I'm kidding. Did you know that? I just found that out this week. It is actually called Sphere because there is another place called The Sphere that is apparently trademarked. I did not know that. All the dumb things you learn. But yeah, it is. People are getting uppity in Vegas. It is Sphere. Thank you. Like, okay, all right. Are we?
Really... I think it's technically referred to as what? It's like MSG Sphere or something like that. Like,
yeah, whatever.
It's
the round place. It's at the round place.
It's funny because everyone talks about a lot. I think a lot of different things when it comes to Vegas. I think there are some, for example, quote, Vegas fans who are, it's Las Vegas, not Vegas. It's,
right. Yeah. No, so, I hear you.
It's really interesting thing, but the NHL draft coming up just in about 2.5 weeks from now. Getting really, really close to it, Tom. And we got a little bit of a sneak preview as some of those players were at the combine, interviewed by some players, showed off their physical skills. What the usual combine goes with, and I feel like it makes me excited that we're getting close.
Absolutely, and I mean it's fun. A lot of hockey minds converge there. Want to say to our friends in Utah that the NHL Draft watch party, to remind everybody, is doors are opening at 4. First round is probably going to end around 7 local time, obviously. And Utah picking 6th has 13, which is the most of anybody in the league. But that is going to be down at the Delta Center. So if you are around the Delta Center, you want to head down for the draft party. It's going to be June 28th, and it's going to be doors opening at 4. So expect 2-3 hours. The NHL is really making it a showcase. Obviously, being in Vegas, Las Vegas, at the Sphere or Sphere. Obviously, I'm very sarcastic if you guys haven't picked up on that yet. It's a great event, but what goes into that is the work that scouts have been putting in Europe, in Asia, at tournaments all over the world, in North America. And you bring these kids in one more time, most of them, not all of them come, to the scouting combine. And it's your final look at players. And it can be a little more technical as far as if you're familiar with the NFL scouting combine. Same thing. Guys are there doing, high jump and 40-yard dash and, those kinds of things. Some of them have nothing to do with the game at all. And that's why I think it's always funny when a guy runs an insane 40 or runs a slow 40 and all of a sudden the draft stock goes up or down because of his 40-yard dash time. It's like, that doesn't tell me if a receiver can separate from a defensive back. Same thing for me. Okay, if a guy's good on his edges, great. If he can skate around pylons, wonderful. Can he do it in a game while he's handling a puck? Or how does he use those edges on defense to maintain his gap to a forward? I said this last episode, I'm an eye test guy. You can throw a bunch of metrics at me and say there's a bunch of numbers here. Maybe they can help a decision. And if I'm tied between two players, maybe it could shift the scales. But when you watch guys work out, you get to talk to them more importantly. The interviews for me is very important. Getting a chance to talk to these young men. What kind of person are they? What kind of player are they? What are their expectations? The athletes of today are much different from 20 years ago. And I think that you need to understand there's a balance of expectations now. It used to be, hi, we're team ABC, we drafted you, and it's our way or the highway. It's not like that anymore. You need to find guys who fit your culture. You need to find guys who can drive your culture and to move the whole thing forward. And that is why the scouting combine is so important, because it's your last real chance to sit down with whatever X number of players that you're interested in. And you never know who's going to be there. In this case, Utah's picking 6th. You never know who's going to be there at 6. The guy you have, and you're like, oh, this is our player, unquestionably our player. Suddenly they're gone at 5. You don't want to be left scrambling. You need 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. You need to know exactly where you're going. Outside of Macklin, Celebrini, I don't think anything's set in stone.
Oh, no, absolutely not. And this is all the things we talked about. And I feel like there is a lot of scouts out there who have talked about, okay, you can make almost a assurance that, let's say, like a Demidov or Levchinov are not going to be available by 6. But
right.
But you could say, hey, outside of that, it really is a fair game. And that's why every GM builds these boards. They have their big board, essentially, where they take a look at, all the scouts in a massive, list from the 1 to whatever number, and said, all right, these are where I rank these players. Let's see if they're available by the time they get to us. Sometimes if there's one that say they had at number 2, but they're available by Utah's number 6 pick, they're like, oh yeah, absolutely, we'll take them. That's an easy no-brainer pick. And it's really interesting.
Teams have different philosophies too. That's important to point out, Robyn, and you hit on that there. Just because a team, and I'll tell you a draft story, it's a baseball draft story, but it illustrates exactly what I'm talking about, is that some teams pick the best player available regardless of position. Some teams draft to fill a need. So back in the 1980s, if I may rewind time, the Toronto Blue Jays decided in their draft they were going to pick a catcher. They needed a catcher. They just we're picking a catcher, best catcher available. We're going to get the best catcher available instead of picking the best player available on their draft board. So they picked a catcher, never made the major leagues. Nobody's ever heard of him. But if they'd have picked the guy they had ranked as the best player on their draft board, they would have drafted Roger Clemens. So there's a difference with philosophies. And sometimes you draft to fill a need. You pick a goaltender high, hoping he pans out. He might be Marc-Andre Fleury. He might play for 20 years. He might not. He might be Rick DiPietro. And part of that's not DiPietro's fault with all the injuries, but that's the other thing. Do you take a defenseman number 1 overall? Some teams would say, I would never take a defenseman first overall with the pick. You got to pick a superstar forward. But what if there's not one there? How do you go in? What are you looking for? Utah, obviously, defense, right? That's where you think the need is. But if your best player available, and that's your philosophy, is a forward, I could see some fans getting mad if Utah doesn't pick a defenseman. But if they pick who they believe is the best player available, is the best shot at being a legitimate NHLer at number 6, I am not mad if they don't pick a defenseman at 6. I'm not.
At that point, at that number, you can't really go wrong with anything. And again, there is still that philosophy to follow by, and we can talk about that and kind of like go a little more in depth on kind of how that's worked in the NHL in just the last couple of years. And we'll do that, though, right after just a quick word. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time makes getting tickets to your favorite sporting event even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app usually go down the closer it gets to the event. The killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, views from your seat, and the lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying your favorite tickets to all kinds of events in your area. NBA tickets, MLB tickets, NHL tickets, and more. Comedy events. Everything in between. Like I said, last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. Easy to find and buy tickets for all kinds of event in your area. Views from the seats in the venue. Low price guarantee. Event cancellation protection. Job loss protection. My favorite feature, once again, all-in pricing. It shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Game Time app. Download Game Time today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And I want to continue that conversation, Tom, about, you know, going through those philosophies and finding things. I feel like I want to go back a couple years to start off with, right, of how it works, because it even goes beyond positional players, and it goes beyond. It goes to character, and we'll talk about even character in a little bit too as we get more into this show. But I want to give some examples here. I would say, let's take a look. 2 drafts ago, we had one of the biggest surprise. Shane Wright, for example, was supposed to be the number 1 pick, and was like talked about. Oh, you know, it's the Shane for Shane sweepstakes. Everyone's trying to, you know, tank to get Shane Wright because easily the number one player in the draft. And then comes the first round of the pick, and Shane Wright's name is not named. Number 2 comes up. Shane Wright's name is not named. Number 3, where Arizona picked, Shane Wright's name is not named. It's all that because those players, like those teams, did not see a fit with them in their franchise. Either maybe because that player just didn't want to play for them. Maybe said them to them outright in their interviews. And again, we'll talk about interviews in a little bit. Or they just realize this player is not what we need.
And that's why you pay your scouts to come up with not only those late round finds, those amazing diamonds in the rough, but to also do the work on and not get caught up in the hype of some players' publicity train, which is so easy to do now, especially on social media. I mean, you get a groundswell of support behind a guy, and he goes from 10 to 2 overnight because all of a sudden everybody's talking about him. Well, who is everybody? You know, look at who is everybody. Is it lots of loud people on Twitter or Facebook, or is it national experts, and do the experts look at it through the same lens you do? Well, not necessarily. If they're talking heads on TV, they're getting paid to generate some interest in some topics, just like we are. You know, and that's why we do the things that we do sometimes, and we talk about the things we talk about. And you have to kind of keep that in mind. So where the scouts for your team earn their money by being unbiased and honest and coming to you with their best judgment call. And if it's not Shane Wright, it's not Shane Wright. Not too long ago, I will remind people that Connor McDavid was not the consensus number 1 in his draft year. Jack Eichel, they were calling it the McEichel draft, up until about Christmas of that year, when suddenly McDavid became the clear consensus number 1. But Eichel was right there. And of course, as we know, McDavid went to Edmonton. Eichel went to Buffalo. Now, Eichel ended up being traded, you know, that whole rigmarole because of his injury and the subsequent surgery. But guess who won a cup first? It was Jack Eichel. Yeah. Now, McDavid's got his chance, but this is just because a player is the most talented, the sexiest pick, has the name that everybody wants. It doesn't always mean he's the right guy for your franchise. And now, look, McDavid should be in Edmonton. They picked first. Buffalo would have picked him first. I'm not arguing that point. But what I am saying is sometimes especially when you're picking 6th, it's not as clear cut as we mentioned. The Sharks know they're taking Celebrini. Great. That's an easy one for them. The guesswork begins after that. And so for Utah fans, to bring this back around, picking at number 6, there will be options. And there will be cases to be made for every player there. So that's why you have to do your homework on and off the ice on these guys and get to the bottom of it.
You're absolutely right. And I feel like that is part of what this combine is about, taking a closer look. Maybe the GMs are there and trying so they can see maybe firsthand, because the GMs maybe have only gotten word from their scouts specifically, but maybe the GMs want to see it themselves a little bit. Just a quick taste of it. And I think that's a huge thing too. Because I'll use Utah, the MO for Utah's GM, Bill Armstrong, as an example. Maybe he wants to say, all right, let's see, who's the biggest guy in the draft? Who's the guy who I can take who's going to be extremely physical, who's going to follow my MO? Or maybe And maybe not. Maybe he tries to see something, tries to deviate a slight bit from that. I don't expect him to deviate crazy much from that, because that's just how Bill Armstrong works. But that's exactly what I'm talking about, though, because that's what he looks for, and that's why he would be there. And that's why the combine is huge for him. A GM like Bill Armstrong.
And the other thing too is when you're going there and you're getting a chance to talk to these kids and you're getting a chance to watch them on the ice, and they're put in situations, you see little things come out, because some guys might, kind of be relaxed about it and be out there having a good time, might be joking around a little bit. Other guys take it dead serious. You see how competitive guys are when they're in a competition where it's just trying to inch out a 1/10 of a second over another guy who might be your teammate, might be a guy you absolutely hate from competition, might be somebody you don't know, but you see a lot of personality traits too in these players, and all of that feeds into, again, it's just not about pure raw skill anymore. Teams talk about culture all the time and how critical it is to them if they're able to win. And I think that is huge in the mindset of everyone from the GM all the way down to the amateur scouts.
And let's talk about that. Let's talk about the importance of that and the character. That kind of plays into what we'll talk about in just a little bit about oddball questions. A lot of you may have heard maybe something that Utah might have asked. We'll address that right after this. And today's episode is brought to you by Policygenius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but good life insurance plan gives you, your family, a financial safety net and protection against some of the unknowns. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace, and it makes choosing the right policy for your family quick and easy. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Get peace of mind finding the right life insurance policy with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes. See how much you could save. That is policygenius.com. Let's get into the interview portion of this, Tom, as we get ready for the NHL draft. For the Combine just happening over this last weekend, and some of the interesting questions that come up. A lot of people were scratching their head a little bit over a question that Utah asked, Utah staff asked to some of these players. I think there were a couple of the questions out there that scratched people's head, but it was one in particular. I think I saw that scratched most people's heads, and it was asking what their Uber passenger rating was. And I'll say this first time before I address anything else. Honestly, I don't think this is the weirdest question we've heard in any recent NHL draft combines. There have been weird questions that happened all over the place.
Well, sure. And so asking for the Uber rating and the Snapchat score, I think is just the beginning. Now, that's interesting to me. And I kind of think from the psychology aspect of it, well, number one, your Uber rating, mine would be 0, because I can't tell you the last time I took an Uber. Years. We're talking years. But if other people are rating you on this is, I don't want to make it a Black Mirror episode, but this is exactly how you can quickly learn something about somebody else through the eyes of how they treat people they don't know. And guess what? As a prospect, you're going to be thrown in a room with 50 people you don't know. So I understand from the why would you ask that question side of things. And I think anything that reveals a little bit of a personality. And here's the other thing, Robyn. When I ask you that question, how do you respond to it? Do you get defensive? Do you laugh? Do you think it's funny? Is it something you're just like, oh, that's a fun question, or that's unique? Or are you like, well, that's stupid? All of those reactions matter. And I think it's not even sometimes the question, it's the reaction to the question. The answer almost is immaterial. So there are all kinds of different ways that teams try to get to know a player. And this is something that is relevant to, a 17, 18-year-old at this point. You're talking about something that is something they would be familiar with. So that's another reason why. But no, there are going to be some weird questions and answers. But a lot of the time, what people don't understand, some of these, look, we've dealt with people in all walks of life who might be gifted at one thing or another, but they're not all socially adept. They're not all, sharing information right off the hop. Some people go into big time interviews and just clam up, get nervous, and shut down. Sometimes the weird questions are just there to open them up and make them relax.
They're like
And
an icebreaker.
right. And so that's, I think we're overthinking this a little bit with like,
Yeah.
well, that's a dumb question. It's like, no, it's actually not, especially if you get someone who's just not opening up to you. Maybe you just ask them, what's your favorite color and why? Something that everybody has a favorite color.
And I'll be honest with you, I am one of those people. If I go right into an interview and someone's that goes straight to an intimidating questions and just going straight into business, I have had a history of clamming up and just blanking everything. It is definitely ruined a couple job opportunities for me, but it's happened. It really has. But the moments I've gotten asked starting off with like icebreaker questions or things like that, it kind of opens me up a little bit. I'll either laugh or I'll kind of like, it makes me think about something. And then all of a sudden it makes me think about that. And so something because it's thinking about how completely obscure it is, takes my mind off the nervousness. And I think that's kind of the thing that you were talking about. It helps these kids who are getting ready for potentially, because it's essentially what it is. It's a massive job interview for something that is going to really put their names in the spotlight. And you're going to
get paid millions of dollars. I'm going to pay you millions of dollars as an employee.
Yeah.
I don't want to hire a jerk. Right? That's not an unreasonable expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not. And I think that's kind of why not only do I like it as an icebreaker, but like you said, it really tells you the personality of those players and just kind of allows you to get any other kind of insight, any other kind of thing. An Uber passenger rating and Snapchat score is one thing. Passenger rating, I'll say this, as you mentioned, it really says the people that how they would treat people they don't know. Uber Snapchat score, I think it's really just show maybe how social they might be. Like how, how many friends they might have,
social media they are.
Or you could really take it either way. If it's like, oh, if I have a Snapchat score of 700,000, you're like, okay, that might be a little bit too much for something like that. Or they could completely, depending on how it's answered, it's like, okay, so you have a lot of friends, you hang out with people, you're very social, you are very open to a lot of people. You could take it multiple ways.
So if you're going to ask an oddball off the cuff question to a potential draft pick, what would your question be?
Oh God, I was trying to think of a potential off-ball question I would ask, and this is something that maybe I can't remember why this came to my head. Maybe it's something that I was asked in the past in one of those interviews I mentioned, but this would be an interesting one. Is what would your karaoke song be?
Okay.
Because I feel like there's a lot of different things. Because that could go down in different ways. Maybe it can. Again, that's truly more of an icebreaker. But it can maybe to me it can also say, all right, what I would hope to hear maybe is like a story of why, right? Like maybe it's something that they would do, that they brought that song on them because it's something that they did alongside their teammates and their members, like a bonding moment for them. Like that's kind of why I would expect a question like that. I would ask a question like that, but I would ask the same thing about you.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. I don't know what my karaoke song would be. Mine would depend on my mood. But
that's fair.
It really would. I mean, I'll sing anything from like country to, rock. So, That's a good one, though. I don't even know if I had to pick one right now. So my question would be, and then I'm going to ask you your karaoke song, so get ready. My question would be, so I have two. One would be a little bit more of an I'd want to open someone's personality up, and it would be outside of hockey. Tell me something about which you are very passionate. So, and if someone says, well, hockey's my life, like, no, it can't be your life, because when hockey's not going well, then what? Where do you go? What's your coping mechanism?
Yeah.
So that I would ask. But the other one that I would ask something kind of goofy too. I would be like, okay, so if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
I like that. That one, that would be an interesting one. Because
anything, breathe underwater, able to fly, turn invisible, what would you want to do? Become super stretchy, what would you do? So and there are a lot of superpowers to pick from out there.
So many superpowers to pick from, and it really would say a lot too.
Yeah, it really would. So that would be an interesting one to me. But do you have a karaoke song? I gotta know.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like from time to time, mine has changed. It multiplies again. I guess you mentioned depends on the mood, but I feel like one that I go to most of the time was Under Pressure, Queen and David Bowie.
Okay.
And it's interesting because I always love, like, I don't like going by myself. I always love to duet with somebody, and it is a 2-person song. I can't, like, it cannot be done alone. And I just always love to do it with a friend because it just makes it more fun. So
are you able to hit the high notes like Freddie Mercury?
Oh God,
that's pretty wild. If you are, like, that's
I try, but I
try.
I adjust to where my vocal levels can achieve. So I cannot go Freddie Mercury levels, but I do what I can.
Okay, that's fair. That's all we're all doing at karaoke. We're all just doing what we can and having a good time.
Just out there for having fun. That's what it is. You're having fun.
That's right. Absolutely. So, all right. Well, so now that we know that we're not going to draft one another into this whole thing. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I just think people are making it a lot out of it, and it doesn't really. People, oh, there's a weird question. Don't worry about it. Sometimes it's just to get kids talking.
Yeah, and maybe those people weren't asked oddball questions in their own job interviews. Kind of really says maybe it says something about that too.
Yeah, where I do think they can cross the line. Let me just throw this out there real quick. Is you can cross the line when you get either A, too personal, or B, something like too political, too religious. You don't need to pin anybody down on that stuff. So that has nothing to do with whether or not you can, bring a winning hockey game. And a lot of times players' social media will speak for themselves. And you'll be able to do that research on your own. I don't think you necessarily need to bring those things up unless it has been an issue in the past, which has caused something like a team rift, or has been like a case for an expulsion from school or something like that. Then you absolutely need to get out in front of that in the interview.
Yeah, maybe allow them to hear their side of the story. They can clear anything up because it might look really bad, but might just be a misunderstanding or something that just completely, like, who knows? If they were able to, maybe it was really bad, but they understood that, they own it, and they talk about that.
Sure.
So I can understand how that can be, an exception to that rule. But yeah, absolutely. I think going too personal, too political, too anything like that shows beliefs that you wouldn't really share with, that you usually keep to yourself anyways.
Not everybody.
Yes, not everybody, because I know there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people out there who love to hold a microphone to everything of their personal beliefs. But that's.
What are you talking about?
Anyways, any final thoughts before we close things off on this episode?
No, I think that microphone move was creepy enough. I'm good.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for today's episode of Locked On NHL in Utah. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. Absolutely free to subscribe everywhere you get your podcast. If you're on YouTube, also hit the notification bell. Lets you know every time an episode drops so you never fall behind. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnNHL in Utah, on the app formerly known as Twitter at LO_NHL Utah. I am at Robyn_Leano. Tom Callahan is at Callahan on air. Interact with us, ask the question you guys might have. We might interact right back or on a future episode of the Locked On NHL in Utah podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode, and we'll see ya next time.